Craziest torture devices ever, part 54. The Spanish donkey. You're crazy if you think the brazen bull is worse than this. Popular in the Middle Ages and allegedly used during the Civil War. You would be placed on top of this wooden wedge just like you're riding a horse, sometimes even fitted with these little nubs. They would then attach weights to your ankles. This was to increase agony and to prevent you from falling off. It was all too common for too many weights to be added, which would result in the victim being completely split in half. Fuck that. The craziest torture devices ever, part 47. The brazen bull. By far everybody's favorite. Allegedly designed in ancient Greece for torture and execution. It was hollow, cast from bronze, and had one single door on it. Legend says it was designed to be the size of an actual bull, and was supposedly fitted with an acoustic apparatus that turned screams into the sounds of a bull. As you all know, you would be placed inside of the bull and a fire would be lit underneath, slowly roasting you alive. Fuck that.
Historical torture methods. The Pear of Anguish. This device was mainly used on women, but was also used on men accused of homosexuality. It basically gets inserted into an opening in your body, be it your mouth, your genitals, or your anus. Once inserted, the key thing at the back gets twisted, and these leaves slowly open, causing mutilation, and of course the internal bleeding would probably end your life. It's estimated that this device was used around the 1600s and onwards in Europe.
Craziest torture devices ever, part 59. I want to know, what is the most painful torture device? I've narrowed it down to 4 that I find to be the most painful. We got the Spanish donkey, the brazen bull, the pear of anguish, or the Judas cradle. Comment which one you think would be the most painful. Spanish donkey, just saying.
Let's take a look at 3 of the most horrific torture methods in human history. Up first we have the heretic's fork. This device was used mainly during the Spanish Inquisition. It had 2 sharp ends which were positioned pointing at the victim's chin and neck, meaning that they couldn't nod their head or fall asleep without risking wounding themselves. The victims were forced to wear the heretic's fork until they confessed to crimes that they may or may not have committed. Next up we have the brazen bowl. This torture device was a hollowed out bronze statue shaped like a bowl with enough space for a human being to fit inside. Once the victim had been locked within the statue, a fire would be built underneath, essentially baking them alive. In an ironic twist of fate, the person that invented this device would also become its first victim. Finally, we have Judas's cradle. This gruesome device was used during the 16th century. It was essentially a 3-legged stool, but instead of a seat, it had a massive wooden or metal spike. Its victims were slowly lowered down onto it until eventually it pierced their most sensitive parts. Comment which of these devices sounds the most painful to you and follow for more.
The craziest torture devices ever, part 41. The iron gag. First used in medieval Europe, but actually made its way to the American prison system. Used for torture, discomfort, and to stifle screaming. This would be tightly chained to your head with the oblong box forced into your mouth. The small hole in the front was just enough for the victim to get air, but a simple finger over the hole would cause a very distressing situation. 1833 is one of the last documented uses of the iron gag. Convict in Lancaster, PA died while wearing one of these. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, part 43. Humiliation shoes. Used in Europe during the Middle Ages for humiliation and torture. They would be strapped to your feet as they walked you to your execution. They weren't all that common, but they were ridiculous and brutal. After they were fitted to your foot, the key on the back would be turned, which would painfully squash and pinch your feet and toes, forcing you to walk in a ridiculous fashion. They even had a little bell to add to the humiliation. There was a few variations based on time period and location. I say we bring these back. Craziest torture devices ever, part 56. The pendulum. Now that is what they called the device, but the method was called strappado or corda, and it had 3 different horrific variants. The first form was simply having your wrists bound like this. The torturer would then yank on the rope, dislocating your arms and shoulders. Those who survived typically were paralyzed and had serious ligament damage. The second variant used your body weight to dislocate the arms, dropping you from a far height like this in public. The third variant involved tying your feet to a weight, which obviously meant they immobilized your legs and your arms. Also, why is this guy in the drawing wearing a flannel? Either way, fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, part 55. The head crusher. One of the most iconic devices throughout the Middle Ages. This was used strictly to get a confession. Your melon would be placed under the cap, with your chin resting on the bar below. The torturer would then begin to rotate the iron bar. The first few cranks would cause excruciating pain throughout the body. Further tightening would cause jawbones to break, and if it was cranked even further, it was very common for eyeballs to pop right out of the head. I know I'd be squealing like a pig. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, part 53. The pillory tub, or just simply known as the tub. The convicted person would be placed into a wooden barrel with only their head sticking out. The executioner would then paint their faces with milk and honey, and soon flies would begin to feed on them. The victim was also fed regularly, forcing them to swim in their own excrement. After a few days, maggots and worms would begin to devour their body, as they decayed alive. Do you still think the brazen bull is worse than this one? Let me know in the comments. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, part 18. The Spanish tickler. Now I know what you're thinking. Sounds pretty sexy. Well, it's not. This one was super simple. A deadly hand extension with 8 to 16 razor sharp fingers on it, sometimes attached to a pole for optimum reach. This one was simply about the creativity of the torturer. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, part 31. The cat o' nine tails, or simply called the cat. The first recorded use of this was 1681, popular in torture dungeons and by the British Army. Each one of its 9 ends had a painful metal claw attached to it, which would dig, tear, and rip your flesh apart. And it's still in use today. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, part 56. The pendulum. Now that is what they called the device, but the method was called strappado or corda, and it had 3 different horrific variants. The first form was simply having your wrists bound like this. The torturer would then yank on the rope, dislocating your arms and shoulders. Those who survived typically were paralyzed and had serious ligament damage. The second variant used your body weight to dislocate the arms, dropping you from a far height like this in public. The third variant involved tying your feet to a weight, which obviously meant they immobilized your legs and your arms. Also, why is this guy in the drawing wearing a flannel? Either way, fuck that.